to the north. Here, the pace is tranquil and most beautiful. The people here are, as Dr. Ben himself would say, burnt of skin. On the afternoon of our arrival on a sailboat called the Felucca, Dr. Ben unfolded the story of the ancient civilizations of the Nile.
According to a great high priest of ancient Egypt by the name of Hunefer, Hunefer, he wrote a papyrus. It's known as the Papyrus of Hunefer, the paper of Hunefer. He said, "We came from the beginning of the Nile, where God happy dwells, at the foothill of the mountain of the moon." The mountain of the moon, there are two places in Egypt, in Africa named Mountain of the Moon. One is between Ethiopia or Kenya and Tanganyika, called Kilimanjaro, means Mountain of the Moon. The other is in Uganda, Rwenzori. It also means Mountain of the Moon. So when you look at it, there's two bodies of water that make up the Nile here. The Nile came down as a body of water from Ethiopia called the Blue Nile. The White Nile is a body of water from Uganda. Both of these bodies of water meet in Khartoum in Sudan. They continue from further north from the south, and they meet another body of water out of the Ethiopian highland, and that's called the Atbara River. And in Atbara, Sudan, those other two bodies meet. Therefore, from then on to here and to the Mediterranean, which was called the Great Sea, that body of water, the Nile, has been the one that played the highway for a major civilization that started in Central East Africa and reached its zenith in this land.
And so you're saying then that the people of Central Africa migrated north up along this river?
Yes, I'm saying that the original high culture, where the people first start to make scratches, symbols, writing down, hieratic and so forth, finally develop into alphabetical presentations, mathematical signs, religious signs and symbols and so forth. They actually had their beginning in Central East Africa.
All right, so there were several thousand years that encompassed this dynastic period that preceded the birth of Christ.
If you deal with Manetho's figure, it will be from 4100 BC, 4,000 years, yes, and to 30. Now, if you deal with other figures like Marriott, Budge, Maspero, and others, they got varying period or varying dates for the beginning of the dynastic period.
All right, now this is a long period of time. There were several kings or pharaohs and queens. A lot happened in this period. There were wars. If someone wanted to get an overview of what was the most significant periods in this 4,000 odd year period, what would you point to? What kings were the most significant, or pharaohs? What queens were the most important?
In reality, that's very hard to do. However, since we all have opinions, the 18th dynasty would consider to be the one with the most action. However, I would have to say the first dynasty, in that brought into effect all that happened after that. What happened is this southern man, the country was divided into two, the north and the south. This man in the south, Nama, the king, organized his other vassals, other small kings, against the man in the north to have a unity, a man called Scorpion. They met in a battle for unity. Either the south was going to control the north, or the north was going to control the south, and they met at a place called Memnefa, to they called Memphis. The war was fought there, and the men from the south, Nama, won. He took his concept of the deity, God, Ra, against the man who lost his concept of the deity, Amen. You would think that he would put Ra in front since he's the one that won, but no. He was wise. Psychologically, he said, no, I wouldn't change. You let the god of the north be the first to be mentioned, and thus he made one god out of two, Amen, Ra. So the people in the north said this must be a good man. He let our God be the first to be mentioned.
And all of this was devised in a place called Memphis.
Memnefa or Memphis.
Now, if we were to go to Memphis, what would we see today? Are there anything that's remnant of that period?
Very little. You will see some statues by Ramesses II, one at least about 40 feet or 30, 40 feet. Two in the yard, general yard, one of them having come to Tennessee when the Ramesses exhibit had come there, another one almost as large, and some other smaller statues. But the main buildings of the temple of God, Ptah. Ptah was in the mythology the god who made gods, responsible for making gods,
The God of all gods.
the god of all gods. And you would see his what's left of his temple, just sporadic pieces of foundation here and there. There is at least a quarter floor, or the height of a quarter floor, any place.
Was this done in Ramesses' lifetime?
The statue, yes.
It was.
Yes.
Did he order things like
You
this?
know, it is in his lifetime. Why?
Why?
Because he is standing on the right foot, left foot forward. If he was standing this way, it would be, he's dead.
He's dead when his feet are together.
But he's standing this way, he's alive.
Very near to Memphis is a place called Saqqara, where the world's first pyramid was built, although it was shaped somewhat differently. Dr. Ben showed us.
Did the Pharaoh design this pyramid and order its building, or did somebody else?
No, as a matter of fact, he had no business at all with it. The idea came from his prime minister, who was also an architect. As a matter of fact, he was a multi-genius, the first one recorded in all of human history. You got to consider we're talking about 2800 BC. This man called Imhotep, or for short, Imhotep. He didn't want his pharaoh to be buried like other pharaohs. He thought his pharaoh should be buried in a much more glorious state than the wood burial place that they had prior. So he decided, when looking around, I could use this material. It lasts forever. And thus he said a stone, limestone, and said, I'm going to build it out of this. But they were building burial places out of this wood in a square. So he decided, well, look, I'll just use a stone or stones and the same procedure, and that will last. But when he was finished, he said, gee, it's going to last, but it's nothing. So he decided to put another layer on the top and recess them, set them back, and there were 6 of them set back, look, something like wet cake. They become steps, and thus the term step pyramid.
This is the second at Abu's symbol. Breathtaking to behold.
You can't look at this and say, they weren't Africans who were doing this. Why would they put somebody else's face?
Well, it's an artistic rendering.
And they didn't have equipment to make thin lips and to make narrow nose. So they had to use that, and it wouldn't be. But then the little details of a fingernail, they had the equipment for that, but not for the thin lips.
Is it important, though, to say that Africans did this?
Oh yes, if no one had said the Africans didn't do it, it wouldn't be important. But since that had been said for no reason at all, they wanted to satisfy themselves that although they were not in history, that they did it. Now, since it is that the people whose ancestors did it could not say anything about it in the past, now is the time that they display to the world whose legacy it is.
All four of these figures are of the same man.
Ramesses II. Ramesses ruled for about 67 years and was an engineer and is known to have commissioned not only that his architect was known to at many times had him come and do some supervision. Like our symbol, it said that he supervised the building of our symbol himself.
So he was an engineer.
He was also an engineer. He was a very accomplished man.
So would he be qualified to be called a priest?
He studied in the priesthood. He took the reign of his father in 1298 when his father died. And he ruled till 1232. Some people vary a few years one way or the other. Some say 1230, some say, but around 2 years isn't going to make it.
How long did he live?
He ruled from 1298, according to Maneto's figure, until 1232, 67 years.
But how long did he live?
He lived to be 98, something like that.
98 years.
98, 97 years old.
And he had how many offspring, do you know?
Well, he had as many offspring as you got guides. Some say this. He had many wives. Some said 200 offspring. Somebody said 100 offspring. Some 30, 40. I don't know, but quite a lot.
And wives? How many wives did he have?
Quite a lot.
Quite a lot. But who was his favorite wife?
His favorite wife was Nefertari II.
What would possess somebody to look at something this magnificent and mark it up like that, then defile it with their name?
Eh? There are many factors. One, hate. Two, grudge. Four, their own smallness. And five, it's a means of saying, I did it.
Now, in between these figures, there's a passageway. What's in there?
That's to get into the temple. That is an actual temple with a hypostyle hall, although there are only 4 columns on each side. And then on the walls, you will see the wars that Ramesses II fought with the Hittites and others. Of course, no record of the war, any war with the Hebrews, none whatsoever.
Right. And at the end of the corridor, there's a little chamber. What's that?
There is what you call the antechamber, and the next chamber to that, the last, would be the Holy of Holies or the sanctuary.
Holy of Holies.
And inside the Holy of Holies would have the triad. You have the Trinity.
Yes.
That's where the concept ancient Egyptian in every city had a holy triad, Triad, 3 gods. Normally a god, a goddess, and a god. A god, the father, a goddess, the mother, and a god, the son. The holy trinity that Christianity adopted. You notice this side. These are supposed to be the Asian captives of war of Ramesses II. You notice that? Carefully. Now let's shift side. These are supposed to be Nubians or generally Africans, but they are tied the exact same way as these on the side. Yet, in America, in the classroom, these are called Negro slaves of Ramesses. But these are called, in the same textbook, by the same professors, Asian captive or Semitic captives.
Prisoners of war.
No, prisoner of war here, but slaves there. Now, what made the difference?
So I can't possibly imagine.
All right, my brother.
Is this the furnace lights I can put on, or are there more lights? Dr. Ben, what are we looking at here? What is he filming?
That is the Opet procession, the procession of the priests And after Ramesses come back from war and is victorious, it is the procession of the priests. Here is before God Ptah. He's in front, Ramesses is in front of God Ptah, appealing for long life. What are we looking at? The war of the Hittites against Egypt. Ramesses pursuing and fighting the Hittites. If you notice, the figures show you the strictly African characters.
So that's him on top of the chariot.
Him and his chariot.
And he's driving them out.
Yes, right. That's Ramesses slaying one of the enemies. And he wouldn't be slaying an ordinary soldier. He's slaying either the mayor or the king, but he wouldn't be shown slain because his men killed the regular men.
Who was he killing, though?
The Hittites.
The Hittites.
Hittites.
And who were the Hittites?
The Hittites are people from Asia.
All right. And there he is again.
That's right. And notice.
Waging war.
That's right.
Yeah.
And there he is wearing a suit with a penis cup, by the way. That is to protect
his enemies.
Slaying the enemies.
As we left, Dr. Ben explained that this magnificent temple was originally located much closer to the Nile River and was recently moved.
So they had to raise this 100 feet up and back 600 feet.
5 nations assigned their best engineers to move these temples to higher ground to avoid them being engulfed by the rising waters from the newly constructed Aswan Dam. The monuments could not be moved intact, so they were painstakingly cut into smaller blocks and reassembled at this present location. The rescue effort cost a then estimated $36 million and was hailed as an engineering miracle, and rightly so. But what then does one say of those who originally created all of this, some 3,287 years ago?
And this is the temple of Nefertari.
The second.
This was Ramesses' favorite.
Its most favorite way. Here's Ramesses.
And he lived to 99?
About 97.
97, I'm sorry. Good man.
Yes, I think he was that.
Now, this is Ramesses again.
This is Ramesses.
And that's a goddess.
That's Hathor.
Although I can tell by the horns.
That's Nefertari. And see the graffiti there too. The mark of graffiti and them all over. It's not typical of their behavior.
What do we have in here, Dr. Ben, on this wall?
The same thing, you have God Horus or blessing the king, and here again you have the God Ptah also blessing the king, King Ramesses II. Nefertiti in front of Ptah.
Now, this is a goddess
Yes, no, it's
by her headdress.
but Nefertiti coming in the person of Goddess Hathor
I see.
and paying honor to the king Ptah.
What is this depicting here?
She is visiting Goddess. She is again paying homage to Goddess Hathor. Remember what I said? Hathor comes with the sun disk between the horn of the cow.
Right.
Now we know it's Hathor. If you put a little chair, the throne, on the top, it becomes what?
Osiris.
Isis.
Isis, I'm sorry.
If you put a maze, it becomes her sister, Nephthys.
How was this work done?
Which is
They gouged out, this is granite,
yeah.
and they gouged it out.
They chisel it out. Now, in some work, where they didn't chisel, they take the work and they put a thin layer of plastic.
Yes.
And when the plastic was damp, they put a plate of the design, lightly, Then they came and draw over it. But in this case, where they got to chisel into the material, it was done with hammer and chisel.
And what about
when in place, not on the ground? They first they put the stone up, then they do the finishing while it's up.
colors? Where did they get their colors?
From clay, from tree barks, and they made their own color flowers different way. They made different kinds of stain and dyes with the color.
To last this long, huh?
Oh yes, because they put it in the mortar, and it goes in and penetrates.
This was a place then for all people to come and worship.
It's a temple.
But the temple was in the name of
Goddess Hathor.
Goddess Hathor.
Nefertari temple for Goddess Het Heru, Goddess Hathor. Hathor or Het is Het, wife, Heru, wife of Horus. Now, what is the significance of the figures being seated? Well, the Pharaoh was at rest and he's sitting on his throne.
Okay.
See, next to him on the side of his throne.
And because Nefertari's feet are one in front of the other, she's alive.
Oh, the whole thing is alive. And you know he's alive, he's sitting on the throne. The only how you would know that he's dead if he had crossed his hands. No, you lift the foot together, he's sitting down. He has to have crossed his hand, which you could do sitting down also, like an X. And then you will see the flail in one hand.
Yes.
And the crook in the other. That means he's dead. But he's one of the pharaoh who in real life had a beard. Because even in alive, they put a beard on him.
Look at those lips.
I got that nose. Can you say I see my father there? And his ancestors? I mean, there can be no doubt about it. However,
Charlton Heston.
yeah, no. and Nefertari is not Elizabeth Taylor.
Thank you. I noticed that between his knees there are cartouches. What did he say?
His name. Amen Mary Ra. Ra Mary Amen. Ramesses. Ra Mary Amen.
So that's a standard that they established to identify themselves as the cartouche.
The monarch was represented by a cartouche. If you don't see the cartouche, you can't. You might have seen a statue look exactly and say, this is so and so. You can't say it because there's no cartouche. To be sure, you must have the cartouche.
But now to identify the god and the goddesses, you don't necessarily need the cartouche because it's the head,
Yes.
the headdress.
Yes. That never changed for the one goddess is never shown with the other goddess appear. You got to be careful in only 3 cases. Nefertari, I'm sorry, Isis or Aset,
Yes.
Het Heru or Hathor, and Nephthys. You got to be careful with them because they're represented with a cow's horn,
All of them?
and a disc within the cow
So
horn.
how do you tell between?
On top the disc, you have a little throne. That's Isis.
Yes.
Without the disc,
Yes.
it's Hathor. And with a little maze, it's Nephthys. That's the way you tell one from the other. Because if you see it, with one, it's impossible to be. If you see the throne and the disc, it's impossible to be anybody else than Isis. And if you
Just to keep you alert, they
make
do
you
that, huh?
make you look for that learn to see who it is.
Another temple that had been rescued from the rising waters created by the dam, the temple at Philae.
What god is this temple
honoring.
Maybe more so goddess. Goddess Aset or Ast, otherwise called Isis. Isis is the sister of her husband, god Asaru, Asar, otherwise called Osiris.
When was this built and under whose dynastic reign?
Well, the earliest period for this will go back to the Roman period, the Greek period. And the Greek period doesn't start any earlier than 332 BC because the Greeks came to Egypt as conquerors during 332, but it didn't start at that particular time. It is supposed to have been started during around 70 or so before the Common Era.
Before we get into more of the religious meaning, just architecturally, this whole alignment, the alignment of the column is just magnificent. And it's just an architectural wonder unto itself. Did it have a ceiling? Was it covered?
Yes, you could see some of the slabs there. It was all covered. But you would notice something else. So that you could notice that this column over here isn't finished, isn't complete.
Yes.
And show you that all that beautiful thing you see, notice that they're in different stages. They would bring the stone and put them in place. Then they would carve them. That's very important note. But you also would note that there is a difference in the typical ancient Egyptian column as against these. These have made transformation in the design.
I see.
And whereas you will see, there's a multiplicity of design concepts in there, and as you go up, you see the difference in change. Here, you notice the fluted part is very narrow.
Yes.
With 3 bands, 4 bands, whereas a little farther up, take the third one, the fluted column is wider, the flute wider in dimension.
I see what you. Now, are all temples, including this one, basically the same in structure, that there's an antechamber and it goes back until you get to the Holy of Holies?
Basically, they start out with a people's court, open, and then if it's a large temple, it will be other courts with different pylons, or that would be a pylon. It would be inner pylons. Now, after that, there will be a hypostyle hall of column, or otherwise called a pillared hall. After that, there will be an antechamber, which would be prior to the Holy of Holies.
Now, it's always at the end.
Generally, the Holy of Holies is the last room to the east. Most of the worship temples are on the east bank. Most of the funerary temples are on the west bank. And the reason for that is Ra rises, God. Ra rises in the morning and comes up in the east. In the night, Ra goes to the next world, go to sleep, and go down in the west.
These two major edifices here, there are figures that were there and they've been chipped away. Who was depicted here, and who chipped them away, and why?
Well, the central figure in all of these is, in this particular temple, will be Goddess Isis. This is her temple. And when you look at this, you will see Goddess Isis and other gods, Lord Horus, which, by the way, is her son. But you're dealing with Horus, or Heru, as the proper name would be, at various periods of his life. You will see then various gods. You see there, Goddess Hathor, which became the surrogate mother of God Heru. So the story is going to give you, from here, you will see other phases of this when you go to other temples. When we go inside, we will see that the early Christians set their cross, and they're going to put them on columns and on the walls. They set their various instruments for worship, like altar and so forth.
I mean, they commandeered this temple for their own use.
Right. They considered heathen and pagan, but they use the same heathen and pagan temple for their own church. This is the purification rites, or baptism. You see the water, symbolically the water, comprises of the Ankh
Yes.
and the Wat scepter. Both things together intermittently. Ankh, Wat scepter, as the water. See, they're hanging down there at the bottom. And this is
Who's being baptized?
the Pharaoh.
Now, as we go back in here now, that is
The altar that the Christians use, the original altar that the ancient Egyptian used, that has gone.
but it was in that room that was known as the Holy of Holies.
Holy of Holies or the sanctuary.
And that was,
Only the high priest.
in a sense, then that was violated.
Oh yes. That is the most sacred part of the temple.
Our tour was now in full stride as we left Aswan and headed north, that's down the Nile, toward the city of Luxor with all its many important temples, as you will see in our next special edition.